Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this important hearing. And Admiral, thank you for your service and your willingness to serve more. And I've certainly enjoyed my colleagues communicating about this issue of the Arctic, something that I think we had a brief chance to talk about. But I thought for purposes of this discussion, just to clarify for people about the activity in the Arctic and the geographic region and transportation through the Arctic is the big question here. And as we see a change in climate, the more people that are going to be using the Arctic, and the fact that we want to be competitive with our shipping interests in the Arctic as well, we all want to be able to say we do business in the Arctic. But the second chart, I think, is the one that I'm most interested in getting your feedback on, because I believe that that chart shows the number of icebreakers that various countries have, the Russians and the Swedes, and here we are down at the bottom with 2. And as you mentioned in your testimony, that even that, with where we are with the Polar Sea, is somewhat of a question on deployment. So the 2010 Coast Guard high latitude study stated the Coast Guard requires 3 heavy and 3 medium icebreakers just to fulfill its statutory mission, or 6 heavy and 4 medium icebreakers to fill its statutory mission and meet the requirements of naval operations concepts. Do you think that still makes sense? Is that the...
Yes, Senator. I was actually working here in Washington, D.C. at the completion of the high latitude study, which did call for 3 heavy and 3 medium icebreakers.
And while there's a popular movie with Drew Barrymore in it, to save a dolphin and calling out, I think it was a Russian icebreaker, our plan is not to call the Russians, right? We're going to have our own capacity.
Well, we have an opportunity through the Arctic Council going forward, the creation of an Arctic Coast Guard Forum. We clearly have some challenges with Russia, with where we stand today with policy on Russia, but when we look at some of the imminent threats, and most of those are environmental and safety of life at sea. In those 2 realms, there is an opportunity for a coalition approach, but when it comes to sovereign interests, the United States is lagging behind, as your chart well depicts, the other primary Arctic nations.
Okay, and are there other branches of service that have Arctic interests that would benefit and thereby also want to help in the contribution of funding icebreakers?
There are clearly a number. We're working with our department right now in exploring a whole-of-government approach to address the number of federal agencies that do have equities in the Arctic. A number of those I mentioned in my oral testimony, but certainly National Science Foundation would be among those as well, Department of Interior, Department of Defense. So there are a number of stakeholders.
The Navy.
And the Navy.
Very specifically,
right?
Well, this is a very keen interest, obviously, to my colleague, Senator Badovich, and to myself and many of my colleagues from the Pacific Northwest. So we certainly want to make more traction than we've made in the past on this. But let me also get you on the record, because obviously we have a lot of other transportation issues in the region, and one of it is this transport of oil sands. You might have seen that spill they had in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they ended up doing a lot of dredging, I think. That's not something that's going to work in the Pacific Northwest. So what is your response to how we would protect ourselves and address the risk of oil sands in the Pacific Northwest? Whether it's on our side or the Canadian side, because going through Rosario Strait there, we're very concerned that even if somebody chose to ship that oil sands on the Canadian side, the water knows no real boundary when it comes to the oil. So.
Yeah. My first concern is the volume that's being moved by intermodal means, by rail car, by barge, and we've seen catastrophes in both those modes of transportation. Tar sands has a high benzene content, so the vapors from that are certainly detrimental to a densely populated area initially, but the response protocols for that are much similar to a light diesel or even a gasoline spill. So we have research and technology on how to respond to that particular spill, but then as the heavier sediment settles out and sinks, our technology is not as sophisticated when you have tar sands that are now heavier than water and then settle on the ocean bottom. So it is a challenge for us.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I see my time has expired, but I think I'll submit a follow-up question on that, because I think that's really getting to the crux of, we want to understand whether the Coast Guard feels a new process should be undertaken for this technology, or whether we're going to say that this isn't a safe route for transportation, because we certainly can't afford to have a spill like we've had in other places happen in that particular area, too damaging to salmon and other resources. Oh, okay, the chairman. I see my colleagues here, but so do you believe that a new process for understanding the technology, a new list of requirements, or how would you approach that?
Certainly with the heavy sediment within this product is a concern of mine, and then how is that safely moved? And so it is worthy of further study, especially if the volume of the movement of this is going to increase by seagoing conveyance. So
would you say we don't really have a plan for cleaning it? We don't have a technology available to clean this up if in fact we did have an incident?
Two-part question. For surface removal, we have very sophisticated technology. Once it settles on the sea floor, our technology is lacking in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.